Awesome. We've got people from all sorts of places. Well, I am, to my great surprise, I'm in the south of France, which I was not expecting. I mean, the last few months have been unexpected for everybody. So I normally live in London. Many of you have already met me in London. You know, pre-pandemic, I was mostly somewhere between London and the US, mostly between London and New York, and Chicago quite a lot. Sometimes Silicon Valley, although I'm not a big fan. And I came to France for a holiday in October, and I've kind of accidentally ended up living here. Anyway, enough of that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to share some slides with you. So we will actually have quite a lot of information to get through. So if you are a note taker, get a notepad right now, because we'll talk about what developers do, we'll talk about designers, we'll have the briefest session on AI and algorithms possible. When you've got your questions, write them into the chat box. Don't write them in the Q&A box. I have no idea why, but for some reason, when I'm sharing slides, the stuff from the Q&A just doesn't come up. So just write them into the chat box. Do not worry about asking questions that you think are stupid, because first of all, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And secondly, nobody is going to know. I'm the only person who's going to see them. So don't worry about other people. Okay, so I know some of you, it's so nice that, you know, I've been in email communication with some of you. I know some of you have come through the podcast. Others have been, I think, to some of my sessions before. So hi, Happy New Year. Happy New Year. All right, let's learn some stuff. And the people who I haven't met yet, hello, let's be friends and let's hang out. All right, this is me on a good day, pre-pandemic. All right, so who am I? What am I doing here? Most of the time I know the answer to this question. All right, so basically I'm a tech entrepreneur, but this is not how life started. So I began my career working in media, and then I worked in finance in a private equity firm in London. Private equity is basically a very traditional type of doing finance. And then I thought, okay, you know, ambition, I'm an ambitious lady. So I thought I'll go to get my MBA. And I got my MBA at Chicago Booth. And Chicago Booth is consistently ranked as the global #1 business school by The Economist and by Business Week. It's where Barack Obama used to teach before he went into politics. And it's got the largest number of Nobel Prize winners in the US. So it's a big deal. The reason why I'm telling you this is partially, I want you to be impressed. I mean, I have an ego, we all have an ego, but also because I went there with a specific intention. You know, I realized that the tech boom was happening. I didn't have a technical education, but also I didn't really want a technical education. Like, I was never going to be a coder. That is not a thing that I was particularly interested in. When I was working in finance, just doing spreadsheet stuff, I found that super boring. I found more the strategy far more interesting. So I thought that going to a top business school would expose me to the industry that is growing most. And actually, I was wrong. So I found out $180,000 later that that is the fee that I paid. I know. So $180,000 later, I realized that actually I was being prepared to work in consulting or in banking, which is basically the industries that I left. And I didn't want to go back to because I was bloody miserable. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to basically try to start a tech-enabled business, start a tech company. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out, thought I. So actually, I did figure it out. And my first business called Enti, it's a fashion tech company. We have built an app that's been used by thousands of people around the world, which has in-app purchases. So it's been used, and it's made money. It has algorithms in it that serves content. So we've created, me and my co-founders and CTO, we co-created algorithms and a website and various other tech products and analytics panel and raised money, et cetera, et cetera. And as a non-technical founder, I found this very, very difficult because essentially nobody tells you how to do this stuff. And I really thought that business school would do that, but no, they did not do that. And in fact, nobody does that because there are lots and lots of courses that basically say, okay, if you want to get into tech, here is a training course for 6 months. You know, take 6 months of work, don't get paid for 6 months. And like after I'd already taken 2 years off and paid 180 grand, I was not in the mood to give anybody any more friggin' money. So, and definitely not in the mood to take up any more time. So, you know, there are all these courses that teach you to completely retrain and become a data scientist or become a to to become a developer, but there aren't courses for people who are essentially like me, people who are smart business people, people who already have some kind of background that actually they're quite happy with. And what we need to do is we need to learn how to work with developers and data scientists. So as I was learning this, and I ended up taking a lot of expensive courses again, not as expensive as that one, but you know, I did end up doing a lot of stuff that actually I didn't need to do, and essentially learning on the job about how to hire developers, how to work with developers, how to get a product out. Essentially, had to learn a whole new language, and I started learning. I started writing about what I was learning in a Forbes column. So I know some of you have come through my Forbes column. So I started writing about non-technical, basically what non-technical professionals need to know about technology. I started writing about that in Forbes. And then some of my work ended up getting into the Financial Times and in the Guardian. And then I realized, okay, this is a thing. So there are other people like me. There are other people who are non-technical professionals who want to understand how to work with tech people, but we don't need to become a techie ourselves. So I realized it was a thing. And especially I realized it was a thing when I was essentially giving a talk and somebody from London Business School came and saw the talk and they asked me to go and teach my course at London Business School. And London Business School, incidentally, is known as the top, well, it's ranked as the global #1 by the Financial Times. So I taught at one global #1 and I was taught by another global #1. So that's basically me. I see that there is a question. Yes, KM, I will get to the question when I've got time, but we just need to get through the core content. Okay, so um, this, there is a reason why there is a sheep sticking out its tongue at you. Partially it's because it's very cute and funny, but there's actually a purpose. So this class that I'm doing today was essentially originally aimed at essentially the person that I was several years ago, a non-technical founder who wanted to understand how apps and sites and algorithms get made. I just wanted to understand this stuff so then I could become a, you know, either get a job in product management or be a non-technical founder. But I think that the way the world has moved on, and also from what I've seen of the people who have taken my course, I think that actually it's a far wider audience because now all of us, especially during the pandemic, we see how important tech has become. We're literally, that's what we're doing to entertain ourselves. We're all working from home. Most of us are working from home anyway. This is now how we shop. You know, a lot of the people who've been in lockdowns without technology, we would have been completely and utterly screwed, basically. But also, so it's a convenience factor, but we're also participants in the data economy, and we're also participants in the manipulation economy. And so most of us are passive users. And because we're passive users, essentially, we are participating without really understanding what we're participating in. And so I think that the more you understand how the products you use, how they get built, and also how the companies that make those products, how those companies make money, then you can make decisions as a conscious participant. What do you want to use? How do you want to use it? What kind of companies do you want to fund? So this isn't about morality. Your morality, your decisions are your decisions. I just want you to be an informed participant because technology is now such a big part of our lives. It's a bit like understanding, you know, that electricity is usually funded by oil. So there are oil companies, and because there are oil companies, that has implications on geopolitics. If you just have that basic understanding, that means you're a more conscious consumer. So I think that actually, even if you have no intention of becoming a founder, you have no intention of becoming a product manager, I do think the stuff I'm about to teach you is just stuff that you need to know to just be a conscious person in the world that we're living in today. By the way, so I've mentioned this course. We won't have time to go through everything, but if you want to delve deeper, if you want to go more into what I'm about to teach you and what I'm teaching you already, then we have the course. It's exactly the same thing that I've been teaching at London Business School. It is starting on Monday the 1st, and you will be able to get the course, and also you'll be able to get a bunch of live sessions with guest speakers where you'll be able to ask your questions. So if you don't get everything right now, don't worry about it, because it's an hour. So I'm trying to put like 5 weeks worth of course content into an hour. So let's get to it then. What you need to understand is that I am viciously against you taking your time and completely retraining to become a coder. The reason why I'm saying that is, if you want to become a developer, then go for it. If that floats your boat, then go float your boat. But if that's not what you want to do, then don't worry about learning the skills. Skills means learning how to make something yourself. What you need to understand are the concepts of how something gets made, and you need to understand who does what on a product team. If you understand that, then you'll be able to ask the right questions. So my aim is for you to be able to ask intelligent questions and to essentially be able to spot bullshit, because that is enough for you to be dangerous. Because then also, if you understand how the thing operates, then you can make wise choices. You can decide what you want to invest in. So if you're an investor, you're an angel investor, or you want to get into career and venture capital, if you understand how this stuff works and essentially how it makes money, then obviously you're going to be a better investor. But also remember, we're all investors. Right now, you are investing your time to spend this time with me. You're investing in your education. So we're always investing our time and our energy in something, which means we're not investing in something else. So when you can ask the right questions, then essentially you can become a wiser participant. In every company, no matter what the company is making, so whether the company is making little pink pens or iPhones, you need people who are going to be making the product, and you need people who are going to be selling the product. So figure out what you're good at, figure out which one you are, and don't be nervous about the fact that you're not the other thing. I find that, especially all the folklore coming out of Silicon Valley, all the stuff about retraining and STEM subjects, you kind of feel like, oh, I studied, so for example, I studied political science in my first degree at one of the top universities in the world. However, because it was political science rather than computer science, somehow in the tech world, you can often see yourself as a second-class citizen. Well, that's bullshit. Because unless you have people who sell the product and who have a strategy to sell the product, the thing that you make, it's literally just going to be, a hobby product. If you want to have a case study of this, then watch a movie called General Magic. You can get it on iTunes. General Magic was a spin-off of Apple, and it was around in the late 80s and early 90s. Basically, General Magic was it was a team of very, very smart developers, very smart product makers, who essentially created the iPhone before the market was ready for it. And they had no business people and no marketing people, essentially, so they had no business plan. So it was a company that was very good at making the product, but when their funding and when their investment money ran out, then they literally had no strategy for this. So what happened? They went bankrupt. Sorry, spoiler alert. So basically, you do need to have both of these to coexist. So again, if you're super good at one, but you're not super good at the other, don't try to be all things to all people, because that's not going to work. Just stay in your zone of genius and understand what other people do. Speaking of, I mentioned that on Tech Non-Techies, we have weekly sessions. So we've got the course, which is starting on Monday, but every Tuesday, we've got speakers who come and talk to us every Tuesday at 12 New York time, 5 p.m. London time. And basically, they teach a class or they do a Q&A session. And so this is an example. This is David Segura. He is one of the top angel investors in New York. He's invested in over 50 startups now, and the reason why he can do that is he is a non-technical founder of a company, of a technology company, which he sold very successfully. And he has he is also against people who are non-technical founders wasting their lives on learning to code unless they decide to become coders themselves. By the way, when I say don't learn to code, I'm saying take a course for a day or two. Like you need to, a day or two is totally acceptable. I'm just saying you don't need to spend thousands of dollars and 6 months of your life learning a skill that you hate learning. Like life is too short. So David says you should become fluent and knowledgeable of software trends and best practices. Learn how to manage a technical endeavor from both a project and a product standpoint, but you will not get credit or a moral victory for becoming an average coder in a world that only values excellence. Recruit and inspire technical talent or co-founders to work alongside you, and get over your insecurities as soon as you possibly can. Sometimes easier said than done, but definitely something to aspire to. You can listen to some of the excerpts with our guests on the Tech Non-Techies podcast. So if you haven't checked it out yet, subscribe to it on iTunes or Spotify. Okay, so the next two slides, so this one and the next one, are literally the most important thing I have to teach you. So after that, I mean, I like to think the whole thing is useful, but literally, like this thing, the linear versus circular thing, once I got this, then it kind of felt like enlightenment and the world, like I just understood things. So stick with me. Traditional products are made in a linear production cycle. So the production process for traditional products is linear. It means it is a line. Digital products are made using a circular production process. And now we are going to have a little example in which I'm going to ask you a question and you are going to type your answer into the chat box. So, as I mentioned, I am accidentally in France right now. And so let's imagine that we're in Paris and we are in Paris in the 1990s and you are working in a car manufacturer. And so it's going to be French. So let's say it's Renault. You're working at Renault in the 1990s and your boss says to you that you are in charge of getting a new car out onto the market and selling it. And basically, off you go. You don't have another brief. You literally have to go find out what the demographic trends are, what's going to be popular in the market, and get this thing made. So what would be the first thing you do? You would study the market. You would see where are consumer trends going, how are people behaving, and you see, okay, so women are working, basically staying in their careers longer. So they're putting off marriage and they're getting married later, and so they're having children later, which means that there are all these women working in Paris with disposable income and no kids. So what are they spending all that money on? They're spending all that money on, enjoying themselves. And so what kind of car does this woman need? This woman has money to buy a car, and this car is essentially going to be for her life, for her pleasure, for her fun. So, okay, so you would then think, given these demographic trends, let's target this particular demographic. What kind of thing would they like? They would like something stylish and something small and something maneuverable. So with this information, you would go to a designer, and the designer, it's a fancy French designer working in Paris with you. So they would make some kind of stylish, beautiful prototype of a design. You would then test that with a group of people. So people in your target market, these stylish Parisian women, and presumably they would give you some feedback. You would remake that prototype, but essentially you would then take that prototype to engineers, and your engineers would then start making that prototype into an actual car. And so, you're doing this blind. What I mean by blind is you're putting in a lot of money and a lot of effort into something without a lot of participation of your actual target user. Yeah, you've had some user interviews, you've showed them a prototype, but it's very, very different from them actually getting in your car. So you are right now in the factory, your car is getting made, is going into mass production, you're really terrified, you're like biting your nails because you don't know if this is going to work because you're operating blind. Then your car gets made, it's not falling apart, it looks stylish to your eyes. And then you have to, in order to sell it, you have to get it out onto stylish shops where you have stylish people with, you know, glossy hair who understand cars and who know how to sell cars. And this entire process, in this entire process, you still don't really know whether anybody's going to buy anything. You have no idea how they're going to use it, and you have no idea whether your target market really actually wants the thing. And this is a very, very expensive process. And now I have a question for you. When the car is in the showroom with these slick people with glossy hair, what is the best possible thing that can happen at this stage? So write your answers into the chat box. Remember, I'm the only person who can see them, so you know, don't get embarrassed. Just write your answers, and I'm going to have a sip of water. The car is in the showroom. What's the best possible outcome right now? Oh, we got it. We got some answers coming in. Let's see. Okay. Thank you, Harriet, Jess, Dimitri, and Delia. I hope I'm saying it right. So, most of you are saying that the car is sold. One of you, a couple of you actually, are saying the car is sold and you get good reviews. So well done to the good review people, because you're getting it, you're seeing where I'm going with this. All right. So obviously we want the car to sell. Yes, we definitely do want this thing. But the thing is, when the car sells, so imagine this, you know, stylish Parisian woman who's working at L'Oreal, she walks in and you're like, yes, my dream customer is buying the thing. And then she drives off. Then you have no idea, maybe she isn't actually going to use it. Maybe she thinks that this car is a piece of shit. And actually, this is going to be for her annoying kid brother, for his like, you know, her annoying, like spotty 17-year-old brother. Or maybe it's going to be for her grandfather to, you know, use on his farm. Maybe it's actually going to be a completely different user. Or, you know, if she does take it and it is her, you don't know how she's going to be using it. You don't actually know if maybe she's going to be cramming 3 kids into it. You don't know how she uses it when she is in the car. Is the cup holder in the right place? Does she have to essentially saw it a little bit in order for it to work properly? So in the best possible case scenario, as some of you said, thank you, in the best possible case scenario, somebody buys it and then you get good reviews in the press. But whatever happens, you still don't really know. Even if it's good reviews in the press, there's a good reviews from some people, but you don't really have a mass information or even much individual information on how the product is being used. This is why when you're thinking about this process, I want you to think about it as a line, because imagine it goes from idea, your idea is here. So you go from idea to design to prototype to development to marketing, and then your customer buys it and then they go off. Maybe you get some reports, but then they go off and essentially never to be seen again. Like that's it. And so when your boss comes back to you and says, okay, now let's make another model, you're almost starting from scratch. And you almost have to essentially start studying the market again and kind of go forth. And you know, here I'm talking about traditional cars. I'm not talking about a Tesla. You know, this is because if we get Elon Musk involved, we're all just going to get confused right now. We need to keep it simple for now. Okay, so this is this linear production process. Now imagine the digital production process, because it starts in a very, very similar way. So we've got the WhatsApp logo here. If you want to stay in the automotive theme, we can carry on with Uber, but essentially, let's do Uber. So Travis Kalanick and his buddies have an idea that, okay, let's have an app that allows you to call taxis. But then they still study the market where they are, and they started in San Francisco, so they study the market, they do some market studies, then they go to a designer, you know, obviously a different kind of designer. We'll delve into that very soon. So a different kind of designer. That designer will make a prototype. They'll still test it with a few people. Then you would go to developers. And so those engineers, again, different types of engineers in both of these cases. Obviously, the people who are working on the app are much cheaper type of engineers. And then the product gets released. And this is where it's at that release point that this is where things get really, really different. At the release point, in the car example, you have to essentially release them to a mass market with a big hoo-ha and lots of PR and advertising and all of that jazz, which is very expensive. And you have no idea how it's going to, like, how it's really going to work out, and might all be a total disaster. In your app example, you're releasing your app somewhere. Imagine probably the Apple App Store. Let's just say the Apple App Store. Apps for the Western world tend to get released first on Apple, and there are reasons for that. Essentially, it's a better market in general. Anyway, so the app gets released on the Apple App Store. Unless you're Kim Kardashian, it's not going to go viral straight away. It's only going to be a small number of people who use it. When people are using it, you're essentially watching how they're using it. So it's as if somebody bought your car and you, like a freak, got in the car with them, and basically you just sit there manically taking notes as they're using the car. So literally, this glamorous woman in Paris, she has bought your car, and you are sitting there like a creep with her as she is going to work, going to the shops, doing whatever she is doing, and seeing, okay, how is she sitting in this? Is her back comfortable? What should we adjust? Like, is she going on long trips? And once you are seeing how she's behaving and how she's using that car, essentially how a user is using your app, based on that feedback, you then go back to designers. So you get ideas, you go back to designers, and then you remake the thing. So essentially, once your digital product is born, it is born. And after that, the moment somebody starts using it, you are co-creating. A car is not co-created with your users. A traditional product is not co-created with your users. A digital product is always co-created with your users. And this is essentially what this looks like. Okay, I can see I've got some questions coming in. I'll see if they're quick, I'll deal with them now. If not, I'll try to deal with them later on. Okay, yes, we will talk about prototype testing. Yes, but prototype testing with a focus group, KM, very good point. Yes, you test prototypes with a focus group, but it is not the same as testing on a wider scale. It's testing using on a wider scale. All right, we will talk about prototype testing in a minute. Okay, so once your product is alive, once your product is out, let's say on the App Store. So once your product is out, essentially, it is not just your idea. You're not just, you haven't been a lone genius working on this for yourself or by yourself for a while, but essentially your product is being co-created with your users, because you're always releasing something. You always have an idea, then you pass it on to designers. Designers make designs. Developers turn those designs into code. Then they release a version of this thing. Once that version is released and people use it, you see how they use it, you get ideas how to improve, and then with those ideas, you get more and more designs. So essentially, in a tech company, in the digital world, this is your life. And if you're the non-technical founder, you're going to be the person in the middle. If you're the person in the middle, you are the product manager. That's essentially what product managers do. I had no idea about this when I first started doing it, because I didn't know product management was a thing. And this is what's so interesting about the tech industry, is that there are so many jobs right now that either didn't exist at all 10 years ago, or just weren't really that popular several years ago. So actually, there's a lot of opportunity that is literally even now just rising, that a lot of people just don't know about, which is what my kind of peeve is with the top business schools, is because I think a lot of them still haven't caught up to the fact that this is what matters now. Knowing this is what matters now, far more than, far more than doing lots of spreadsheets. All right, so what is a product manager? So a product manager is essentially like the conductor of an orchestra. So this person is a product manager. He's a senior product manager at Facebook. And if you join Non-Techies, you'll be able to see his class on demand. So we've got, by the way, we've got people who come to talk to us every Tuesday who you can ask questions and get feedback from them every Tuesday. And also you can get a library of all of the recordings. And so when I'm mentioning people, these are the kind of people that you have, but also you can see the kind of caliber of speakers that we attract. So essentially, Rags Vidali, he started his career in Google, then he worked at a few startups. He got his MBA at Chicago Booth, so we're both alumni of the same school. And then he went to Facebook. And what I really love this description, because he actually hires product managers at Facebook. And he said that a product manager is like the conductor of an orchestra. If you think about a conductor of an orchestra, they usually don't, well, I mean, it's impossible for them to know how to play every single instrument in the orchestra really well. They also haven't written the music. Think about it. Mozart was born a while ago and he died a while ago, yet there are people still playing his music. So the conductor of an orchestra is responsible for getting the best out of people and making sure that they're all following a particular vision rather than doing everything themselves. And this is exactly what a product manager does. By the way, if you want to get a job in product management, the most important thing that you need to do is get a product out. This is why the dirty secret in startup land is that it's very often that you'll see that people essentially use their startup experience to get a very well-paying job, either in venture capital or in product management. So essentially product management jobs in, for example, in Facebook, etc., they tend to be interesting and they tend to be quite well paid. Venture capital, obviously very well paid. So I'm not saying go start a company or join a startup as a stepping stone, because the best case scenario obviously is if the thing you start like goes wildly crazy and it's really good, and and you create something that has a positive impact on the world. That would be wonderful. But what I'm saying is that when you're taking risks, you want to be able to mitigate the risks. And it is a very, very normal career path for non-technical founders. The moment they have shipped a product, so the moment they've actually gone through that circular production process, the moment somebody has actually used their thing, and and you don't need to have millions of people using your product. If 100 people have used your app, you've then analyzed it, you've iterated it, then another 100 people used it, you have shipped a product. You're perfectly capable of getting a good product management interview at that point. Okay, so as a product manager, you need to make sure that everybody, all the people who are doing jobs that you can't do yourself, you need to give them a target, because all of those people are going to be moving towards that target, doing things that you don't know how to do. But if they're moving towards that target, essentially they're going to be specialists in how to get to that target in their own particular way. So a good target is not, let's make an app that goes viral and makes us billions. That is not a target. A target needs to be a specific metric in your product within a specific amount of time. So let's imagine you're making some kind of content entertainment app. And your aim is going to be something like, we want the average user to watch 5 minutes of content per session in our app in the next 3 months. So right now, an average user is only watching 2 minutes of content. We want to increase engagement to 5 minutes in 3 months. That is a specific key metric. Remember that your key metric, your key product metric, your North Star is going to change with time. So, right at the beginning, imagine in that entertainment content app, maybe right at the beginning, your key metric is that people register for an account and sign up for a free trial. That's going to be your first thing. Then maybe after enough people did that, you will want them to maybe engage in another way. So essentially, your product metric is evolving as your product evolves, and your product is evolving as your business evolves. But this is where you need to make sure that you keep your product metric and your business metric separate, because they are different things. The best and easiest way for me to show you this, because I said we don't have a huge amount of time, we still have a lot to cover, and I have all these smart questions from you, which I hope I'll be able to get to at least some of them. Okay, so most of us are users of one of the Facebook products, at least. So let's just imagine Facebook or Instagram. So you don't pay to be on Facebook, you don't pay to use Instagram. So when you are using Facebook, Facebook wants you to engage. Engagement basically means you using it in some shape or form. It could be that you're uploading content, so you're uploading a photo, you're doing an Instagram story, or it could literally be very passive engagement, you're literally just liking posts. So, or even you could just be scrolling, because if you stop scrolling, Facebook understands that you got interested in something. If you just carry on scrolling, it means that the content you're seeing is not interesting to you. So that is engagement. And there are all sorts of metrics that show your engagement. So how many likes, how many minutes in the app, how many comments, how many shares, those are engagement metrics. Facebook translates those engagement metrics into revenue, because the more engaged you are, the more adverts it can show you. And also, the more engaged you are, the more targeted those adverts can be. So you see, engagement here is a product metric. Revenue is a business metric. What you don't want to do is you don't want to go to developers and give them a business metric, because they don't know what to do with that. What you want to do is to be able to translate revenue to, you want to translate business to product metrics. I personally find that this is a really interesting, I think this is a really interesting exercise, and sometimes you get it wrong and sometimes you get it right. It's a constant evolution, and this is, I think this is one of the most interesting pathways for non-techies to be in. And it's not only for product managers. So if you're an investor, or you're an aspiring investor, or if you are working in innovation in a big company, or you're working in a big company which is a traditional business and you want to digitize, it's essentially this kind of stuff that you will be working on. But in order to be able to translate business metrics to product metrics, you need to understand what this stuff is, basically. But for none of this do you actually need to go and build the thing yourself. Okay, so that's your crash course in product management. Okay, so as a non-technical founder, or if you're leading some kind of innovation project in a big company and you are going with a budget to your investors or your boss or whoever, excuse me, right, what you need for a basic tech team, for an app or a site, you are going to need a designer, a back-end developer, and a front-end developer. You do not need all these other people. You do not need a CTO from the start, which means in many cases, if you're building a tech-enabled business, and I'm not talking about a deep tech business, but a tech-enabled business, you do not need a technical co-founder. A lot of Silicon Valley will tell you that this is what you absolutely need to have. Technology has moved on a lot since then. So somebody, KM, I believe, mentioned that now there are even no code apps. So actually technology is moving so much that actually, in order to build something fairly simple like an app or a site, so like, for example, Airbnb, technically, especially the beginning, was very, very simple. You do not need to waste your time hunting technical co-founders. You absolutely do need to have a designer, and you absolutely do need to have a back-end developer and a front-end developer. You need to have an understanding of what data scientists do, but in order for data scientists to actually do their job properly, you need to have a lot of data. And right at the beginning, you are not going to have data. It is also possible for a non-technical founder to build an AI business. If that is what you're doing, your prototype is not going to be a thing that you touch. Your prototype is going to be an algorithm. If all you're doing is building an algorithm, you just need a developer, usually some kind of backend developer who will be able to work with you to create your algorithm. That is possible. It is a less likely scenario. You need to do a little bit more training. You need to probably study a little bit of statistics on this, but still Our last guest on Tech for Non-Techies is literally this person, a person who worked in banking, a person who understood that if you used AI, you will be able to make better lending decisions than the way the bank was currently doing it. And so essentially, he used a spreadsheet to create an AI algorithm. But that is another topic. Okay, so when you've got your idea, you have understood what product management is in general, you understood that this is probably a job that you're going to be doing. In that job, you need to understand that you need to translate business metrics to some kind of product metrics. You also understand that it's not a fixed goal, and you also understand that you're going to get it wrong, but it's fine. As long as you keep on iterating and trying, you'll get there. The first thing you're going to do, the first people you're going to hire are going to be designers, not developers. This is really, really important. This literally, if you just follow this advice, you would have already saved yourself thousands of dollars, because this is a mistake that most non-technical founders make. When we have an idea, we get so excited, we want to hire developers, we want to have a technical co-founder, we're looking for a CTO. We completely forget that developers cannot do anything unless they have a design. So don't even fart in the direction of a developer until you have a designer. Okay. The kind of designer that you're working with needs to be a user experience designer. So make sure that the kind of person that you're working with is not only a graphic designer. Graphic designers are very good at making beautiful graphics, making beautiful screens with beautiful logos and colors that go together. Now, that is important. I'm not saying that's important. We're visual creatures. We need beauty. Beauty is important. If you make something ugly, people are not going to want to use it. But if you make something really beautiful, but nobody understands how to use it, the design is not intuitive, or it's just not pleasant to use. Some of those apps, I find that a lot of the high fashion apps, they're very beautiful. They have a big focus on beauty, but they really have terrible design. So until recently, the Vogue app was really, really rubbish. I don't know if it's any good anymore because I just couldn't handle how terrible it was. But essentially, you want somebody who understands how to make something visually appealing, but also intuitively easy to use. And what's important, that what's intuitively easy in the culture where you operate is going to be different in another culture. So the biggest examples is, you can literally, after the session, stay with me. If you look at some of the most popular apps and sites in China, they will have a much more busy design than Western eyes are used to. To the Chinese market, the Western design, so imagine the Google homepage, it's very, very clean design. To a lot of the Chinese market, that looks very, very boring. Whereas if you actually go on some of the Chinese websites, to you'll probably be overwhelmed. Now, there's no right and there's no wrong. These are just cultural contexts. But you just need to be aware that if you're working with a designer from a vastly different culture to where your user comes from, it's possible that they're going to design something that's very intuitive to where they come from, but is not going to be intuitive to your target user. So just something to be aware of. Okay, when you're working, remember, this is actually another one of our goals, another one of our guests from Tech for Non-Techies, whose session you can watch in your membership. So he is a member, Design Standards Board member at General Assembly, who reminds us that we need to focus on users. Users have goals and they use an app to achieve a goal. So for example, you use Netflix to entertain yourself. You don't care about Netflix, you care about your entertainment. And this is why it's so important that it's user experience, not your experience. So you need to be constantly co-creating your product with your users. So when you're working with a designer, your designer will work with you to have 3 different outputs: a prototype, a wireframe, and a product specification document. So that's a prototype, a wireframe, and a product spec. A prototype is essentially something that's like a model. It's like a model that looks and feels like the thing that you're making, but it doesn't contain any code. So yeah, you do need to pay a designer something, but you don't yet have developers involved. So it's not going to be as expensive as making the whole thing. So essentially, you will work with your designer to make a clickable prototype. You will then test that prototype, and it is best to test it with a small number of people. There are actually quite a lot of studies that show that if you test your product with only 4 people, they will uncover 85% of errors. Now, there was somebody who brought up prototype testing, who is my smart person, that so I believe it was KM. Anyway, so a very smart person, yes, KM, I think, said that when you're testing, when you have a prototype, you need to test it with a small control group. Absolutely correct. So this, I think that this is very, very good news, because you know, when we talked about our linear production process, and it's a very linear production, and essentially that is I find that process very, very scary, because you're operating, yes, you're maybe testing your car with a control group, but still it's a very, very expensive production process, and you don't really know what's going to happen until your car is out. Whereas with this, working with a user experience designer and making a prototype in prototyping software and testing it with 4 people, it's a very, very cheap process. So again, if you're working in a big company and they want to digitize, it is not going to be that difficult. So once you've got your prototype, your wireframe and your product specification document are essentially just descriptions of the prototype. Once you've got this thing, you then go to developers. And when you're working with developers, you will have something called a back end and a front end. Very broadly speaking, the back end takes longer to build because it is more complicated. Because it is more complicated and it takes longer to build, it has to be built first. Logic. You see, all the stuff that I'm teaching you, like, this is not complicated. This is not anything beyond your comprehension. And if you just understand the basics, and if you're still here and you're watching this, that means you're understanding the basics. Honestly, the world of, your career, but also your understanding of just life as a citizen will open up to you. So the kinds of things that I have been able to do as a result of, I don't know, for example, the app that we created, it was App of the Day on Mashable. And then that ends up getting press coverage for me. It ends up, and then I ended up being an advisor to a Microsoft accelerator, which honestly, like me advising an accelerator by one of the largest tech companies, that's not something that I ever expected. But this is what I think a lot of non-technical people miss, is that you think that kind of the more interesting work in the tech world is only available to the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, but that's not true. Yes, I mean, he is this very influential, now controversial billionaire, but if you understand the basics, you can also do really, really interesting things and even end up advising a Microsoft accelerator. I mean, honestly, when this happened, I was honestly like, wow, this life is getting interesting. All right, so when you speaking of which, let's talk about the back end. I know, how romantic. Okay, so very basically, this is a WhatsApp, or for the Americans here, I know Americans don't tend to use WhatsApp that much. This is a Facebook Messenger conversation between you and a friend. Basically, when you're sending a message on your phone, you are writing on your phone. So that means you are writing, you're interacting with the front end. Then when your message leaves your phone, it goes somewhere. That somewhere is this. That is the back end. The back end then redistributes your message to your friend's phone. Very, very simply, a front end is the thing that you as a human interact with. So if you can touch it, if you can speak to it the way I speak to the Alexa app, the Alexa thing, you know what I mean, the device. If you can speak to it, if you can touch it, like if you can interact with it, it means it's a front end, because a front end is a computer that interacts with humans. So that is the front end and that is the front end. That is the back end. A back end is a computer that only interacts with computers. So you as a human will never interact with it. It's kind of like a house. So, here I've got my lovely peachy wall, and that is the front end. I can see it. I cannot see the foundations of this house, but without the foundations of this house wouldn't be able to stand. But equally, if the foundations are absolutely perfect and wonderful, but somebody forgot to put in the windows and there was no doorknob and I couldn't get into the door, this house wouldn't be usable either. So you need a symphony of both of these two things to come together. Because equally, if you didn't have a foundation to the house and you just had a doorknob, well, that's not going to be very useful either. All right. The word server is often interchanged with the word backend, which is also often interchanged with the word API. Now, they all mean slightly different things, but for the purposes of right now, we're having a very surface discussion, so I want you to get this knowledge. In the course, we'll go deeper into it, but essentially, a server and a backend and an API all happen on the server side. So see, back, front. So this is us, and we are in a group chat. So we're in a group chat on Telegram or on WhatsApp or whatever. And this is a really, really good example of essentially what servers, which is what happens in the back, and what servers do. So servers do two things. They enable storage and they enable communication. So storage, all your stuff, imagine, okay, on Facebook, all the information that you have ever shared with Facebook, all your photos, all your likes, all your cat videos, that is stored on a server. But also, it's not just your information. Netflix also has to store all of those movies. They all have to be stored somewhere. And that's the server. And that's what cloud storage is all about. So when you're reading about AWS or Microsoft Azure, this is essentially what it talks about. Servers also enable communication. So in order for, this is me talking to you guys, when we write in our little chat over here, that means one of you is sending a message, that message goes to here, and then it gets redistributed to me. And okay, if I made it visible to everybody else, it would get redistributed to everybody else. So literally, this is a very good example of literally what we're doing right now. Okay, we've got 6 minutes to go. So I'm just going to speed through very, very quickly. Okay, when between stage 1 and stage 2, oh, by the way, what's important before we move on, I really want you to remember that there are a lot of people, well, there are some people who call themselves full stack developers. Somebody who says they're a full stack developer are a person who claims to be able to build the back end and build the front end. In my experience, it is better not to work with those people, because in general, that means that they have had really good training on one, but they don't yet, and they're trying to transition into the other. And I'm all for career transition, because this is what we're doing here. Tech for Non-Techies, that's what it's all about. It's about you enhancing your knowledge of what you already know, just making you more prepared for the digital economy. That's essentially what we're doing here, right? So I'm all for career transformation, but I don't want you to end up in a situation when you're learning and you don't know what you're doing, and then you're hiring people who also don't know what they're doing, because then it's going to be the blind leading the blind. So if that happens, that could be an expensive error, and I don't want you to make it. Okay, so once your product has been built, so I can see we've got questions. Okay, server size demand, Dele, that is an excellent question. Dele is asking me, how do you determine your server size demand? So that's a deep question. We just don't have the time to deal with that. And how quickly can a business respond to an increase in take up? If your servers are with Amazon, you just pay them more, and then they just increase your storage size. So most companies now outsource their servers to Amazon or Microsoft. Even Netflix's servers actually belong to Microsoft. So if basically, no, to Amazon. So if Amazon Web Services go down, most of the tech products that we use would go down. So basically every night, let us pray to the God that is Jeff Bezos. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, we don't want AWS to go down because otherwise we will not have Netflix. And I mean, that's basically my social life right now. Okay, so once your developers have they have coded the prototype that you've worked with your designers to make. They have created the thing, the back end and the front end is made. You then release it. Remember we talked about before, we're going to release it on the App Store. So let's say it's the Apple App Store. So on the Apple App Store, there tends to be a richer market, more willing to spend. So it's generally better. So you release it over there. As we said, unless you're Kim Kardashian, people are not going to use your product. So you need to make sure that some people use it. So you need to somehow get people to use it. So either have a social media following already or have an email list, and then release your product and analyze and understand how people use it. Okay, 3 minutes to go. We might go over by about five minutes, but no longer. Okay, once your product is out, what you are doing is you're doing analysis. You're doing product analysis. You are not doing data science. Those are two different things. Make sure you do not confuse them. You know, if you confuse them, nothing bad will happen. It will just be a bit silly. Okay, the aim of product analysis is to understand whether the product that you made is actually being used by people and how they're using it, and whether your product metrics are actually doing anything relevant to your business. So this is a really, really good example. An example that I think a lot of us can understand. You know, when you get a push notification, most of the time that push notification is linked to some kind of business goal. So this is a newspaper that sends a push notification for you to see a news story. Then they're measuring how many people who got that notification read the news story. Then how many people end up staying in the app to read other news. And out of all of those people, how many people actually buy a subscription. So you see, this is a product action, which then leads to a business metric. And this is product analysis. So these people have analyzed 100,000 users. You don't need to do that. If you have analyzed 100 people, and literally, if you have 100 people receiving the push notification and only 2 of them read the article, you don't really need to analyze another 200 people. Like, you already know that this thing is not working. So again, you just need to have small improvements, small incremental improvements. Data science is only something you can do when you have a lot of data. And remember, when you have rubbish data, then you end up making rubbish algorithms. Okay, we have to wrap up now. But if you want to learn more about AI, we have a fantastic class from a Harvard Business School professor of artificial intelligence in Tech for Non-Techies, which you can watch on demand, which is actually very, very simple. It's really, really simple to understand. And Professor Yanciti says that the AI that can drive explosive growth in a digital firm is actually not that sophisticated. So I just want to show you, essentially, this is a very, very simple way of understanding how algorithms and artificial intelligence get made. So you end up having a bunch of data. That data is usually on the characteristics of people, so their gender, where they live, and any specific things that we might know about them. So I don't know, do they drive a car? What kind of car do they drive? You know, all of basically stuff about a person. Also, so we take that stuff about a person, and then we take behavioral data. So how does that person act? So let's say it's Netflix. They're going to be taking the data that they know about you, so who you are, where you live, etc., and then matching that with what do you watch, how often do you watch it, when are your binging days, when are the days when you don't watch it at all, how do you match your content? So basically behavior data and data about you. And data scientists match that data to essentially then work with engineers to create algorithms which can then predict how a person like you is more likely to behave. So what kind of content would you like to see on a Saturday, maybe versus on a Monday? What are you most likely to be excited by after you have seen a particular thing? If they get this right, if they analyze the data correctly and they create the correct algorithm, they're going to give you the content that you want. If you get the content that you want, you're going to use their service more. The more you use their service, the more data they're going to get about you, the better their algorithms, and basically you're going to be stuck watching Netflix forever. This is your basic recommendation engine. This powers Amazon, this powers Netflix, this powers the newsfeed in the Facebook, the Facebook newsfeed. In the course, we actually break down the Facebook newsfeed algorithm and we go through it. But essentially, an algorithm is just a set of instructions. It's just a fancy word. Like, honestly, it's a very simple concept. It's just in a fancy word. So don't freak out. All right. So our course starts on Monday. So if you want to join me, enroll now. I have given you as much as I possibly can in an hour. So if you want to delve deeper, this is what we're going to be doing. It is exactly the same content that I've taught at London Business School, but you do not have the monstrous price tag of, and you don't have to do the GMAT. So it's basically a much better deal. Okay, these are the details. You're also going to get them in your email. The general course price that you see on the website is $699, but in my email, you are going to get a much better offer, which is going to be the course and the Tuesday sessions when you can ask all sorts of questions and get feedback on what you're doing, get feedback on your career choices that you want to pursue and on the startups or ideas that you're working on, essentially for less than the course, and you get the membership for free. And people have actually used the course to get funding. People have used the course to transition their careers. So if this is what you're interested in and you want to get into the digital economy, this is a very useful thing that you want to be doing. Okay, all the information is going to be in your inboxes. Now I've got some questions. I can see I'm going to try to answer. Deli, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by what's the frequency. The course lasts 5 weeks, and essentially there are 5 topics. So we talked about the topics, the product management, design. So you'll have one section, 1 week on product management. You do get homework. So I'm not yet sure when we're going to have the next time because it does take some time and effort from me. But the Tuesday sessions are rolling all around, but it's better if you take the Tuesday sessions plus the course. Okay, what else do we have? Okay. Guys, in terms of what is the time commitment each week and are there specific class times? Okay, that is a really useful question. So let's, in terms of class times, most of basically the content in the course is pre-recorded. So you can watch it and the videos are quite short. So you can watch one, let it sink in. You get new videos and new content and you also get a lot of notes that you can download and like keep forever. You get new content released every week. You also have a live session with me and an expert every Tuesday. The Tuesday sessions are at 12 p.m. EST, which is 5 p.m. GMT. If you can't make those sessions, we also have another session every first Monday of the month, which is literally just a Q&A. So the point is, I want you to learn the content and then come to me and come to our expert speakers and essentially get feedback on the content. If you have questions about the content and you also want to share those questions, you can also post them in our discussion group and I'll get involved and people from the course also can get involved and share their experiences. So in terms of the time commitment, it's going to be really, I'm just going to give you an honest answer. It's one of these things that if you literally if you do like 1 hour a week, you will get something out of it, but it's not going to be great. Like I would say that if you put in something like 3 to 4 hours per week, you will get quite a decent understanding. Obviously, if you put in more, you'll get even more, but I think 3 to 4 is fine. The content, the weekly content, I would say kind of minimum to minimum get something relevant out of it. It's like about 3 hours. But then each week you get a homework. The homework is not something that I mark. If you want to get feedback on your homework, literally just come to the live sessions and then we can discuss it, but don't send it to me because then I'll be overwhelmed. Um, the homeworks are essentially ways for you to take the information and absorb it, because I'm very practical, and I'm very much against people just learning from books and then essentially you watch some videos, you read a book, and then immediately you forget about it. The way you let information solidify is when you've learned a bit and then you have actually applied it. So for example, we have a UX questionnaire where literally I ask you a bunch of questions that a designer would ask somebody who is making a prototype for the first time. It doesn't mean that you need to make a prototype, but once you have those questions in your head, you could literally even apply those questions to a current app that you're using. If you're applying those questions and you're thinking about them, that means you're understanding technology in a way that you weren't before. Now, this homework could take you half an hour to do, or you could end up doing it all day. That's totally up to you. The homeworks are there mainly for you to learn this stuff. But if you're doing 3 to 4 hours, you'll be fine. You can do more, but I don't know if that's going to be possible. All right, any more for any more? Otherwise, I think I'm going to have a glass of wine. Okay, does it cover how to protect your ideas as the idea person for a startup? Okay, this is this is a really good question, Jess. And I'm just going to burst your bubble. Nobody is going to steal your idea. No, the reason why I'm saying this is startup founders often really worry about this. So, oh, guys, sorry, I haven't even read out Jess's questions. So Jess says, does the course cover how to protect your ideas as the idea person for a startup? Legal issues are a big concern for me, bringing my idea to life. So this is a good question because so many people worry about this question. And I'm here to tell you not to worry about this question, because essentially ideas are a dime a dozen. I'm not saying that your idea isn't good. What I'm saying is that there are a lot of people with ideas, but the reason why a startup doesn't work out is usually not the idea, it is the execution. And the execution can be as minute as, after you've had 30 rejections from investors, you just can't find it in yourself to get up and like go for the 31st pitch. So is it because the idea is bad? No, that's nothing to do with it. It's just the fact that, we're humans, we get worn down. Also, in this build, measure, learn thing, it's hard. It is something that I think can be difficult for the psyche. Sometimes you argue with your co-founders. Co-founder bust ups are another reason why startups fail. But anyway, I don't want you to think about that. What I want you to understand is that the reason, in terms of the kind of patents or startup idea protection, that's not really something that you want to be worrying about too much in terms of legal protection, because essentially the moment you get your idea out there, the moment your products exist, people are going to copy it. Look, the moment Snapchat came out, Facebook copied it. Snapchat didn't die though. It didn't, this is what happens. Products come out, people copy each other. But if you're asking in terms of what do I do because I'm the idea person and I have a bunch of co-founders, well, the way you do that is literally through equity division. But also, if you're an idea person, you can generally get a bump in equity, but also you need to be doing the work. So if you just had the idea but you don't do any of the work and everybody else does all the work, then you get a small portion of the equity. In terms of patents, You can get patents for inventions. So an algorithm can be an invention, but a startup idea in itself is just not something that that's going to make sense to legally protect, because essentially also just another thing you're going to be doing is you're always going to be pitching. You're going to be pitching to get co-founders, or basically you're going to be pitching to get a team to join you. You might be pitching for funding. You'll be pitching for sales. You'll be pitching to journalists. And what is pitching? Pitching is telling people about your idea. So your idea is going to be out there, the moment it's going to be out there, people are going to be looking at it. That's just business life. Okay, so yeah, I know it's scary, but it's just the world that we're in. Okay, well, Delhi, thank you very much. It's very nice to hear you. So you're saying you're in the middle of facilitating the expansion of a tech company via consultancy into Africa. Wow, that's no mean feat. Well done. Gosh, such smart people on this session today. All right, well, look out for emails from me. You will get all of the details. Also, for those of you who have been listening to the Tech for Non-Techies podcast, thank you. If you haven't left me, if you haven't left the podcast a rating and a review yet, and you're on iTunes, then go do that. Um, that would be a great help. And hopefully, I will be seeing many of you next Monday when we start studying together. Thank you, Jess. You've been amazing too. Let's have a fantastic. I'm going to celebrate all of you by drinking wine. That's what I'm going to do. It's evening. It's not day. It's evening, and I'm in France. All right. Okay. Bye.